Welcome to the Financial Freedom Podcast, where we interview remarkable people and share strategies for mastering money and living a meaningful life. With your host, Grant Sabatier, creator of Millennial Money and author of Financial Freedom, a proven path to all the money you will ever need.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show today. I'm very excited to have a special guest, Charles Eisenstein, who is the author of Sacred Economics and his recent book, The Coronation. It's very rare that I stumble upon a book that completely leaves me breathless, and Charles' book, Sacred Economics, is one of those books. Throughout my journey, you know that I've moved from corporate stiff to, side hustler to financial independence, and now moving through towards exploring consciousness in both my own life and trying to be much more intuition-led. And Charles' work, Sacred Economics specifically, really for the first time exposed me to this idea of, say, community as currency, really the sort of desire and the need in an increasingly sort of late stage sort of capitalist moment to kind of reconnect to the people that are around us, and want to really explore how we think about money and how Charles thinks about money, and more importantly, what are some steps that you can take if you're feeling increasingly disconnected from the money-making apparatus and the system. Charles' work is extremely expansive and covers not only economics, but philosophy and consciousness and spirituality and politics. And I'm very excited to have him on the show. Welcome, Charles.
Happy to be here, Grant.
So I want to start, what is your relationship with money?
Well, I use it pretty much every day. I make most of my money, I guess, through my books, book royalties, publishing on Substack, where people can choose a paid subscription if they want, but they don't have to, and I don't withhold any content based on that. I don't know, that's a pretty big question. What is my relationship to money? I also, like a lot of people in a way, I resent money. Money gets in the way of a lot of things that I want to do, not only for myself, but for other people, for the world. And, sometimes the most beautiful things I want to do, and maybe the most valuable things I want to do, they don't get rewarded or recognized in the economic system. So, and for me, this is much less than for most people. I pretty much do what I love, and I receive support for doing that. But I know a lot of people, I kind of resent money by proxy, just because I'm so aware of how many people either have to do something that they hate or that is degrading or tedious in order to make a living, or maybe they are financing their beautiful, meaningful work by working a job that, their passion really isn't in it, or they have to compromise some important value in order to do it. So, I'm aware of all the different dimensions of money. And yeah, we could, talk about a lot of pretty much anything you want.
Yeah, I want to talk about money as energy, because that's something that, I think so many people believe money is this tool, and it is a tool, but I think it holds so much potentiality, so much power, so much weight, so much baggage. Can you talk a little bit about that? Do you think money is energy? Is it a tool? Is it all the above? What is it to you?
You can look at money through any of these lenses. Money is energy is one of them, and it will reveal and illuminate certain things about money, and maybe it won't let you see other things about it. In the Sacred Economics book, I looked at money through various lenses. Really, what I think it is fundamentally is an agreement. It's an agreement among human beings to invest value into these symbols. The symbols could be imprinted on a coin, imprinted on a piece of paper, or merely something that comes up in your computer when you go visit your bank login page. But on a physical level, they are just bits and bytes. They're just data. They're not anything. On a physical level, they're just electrons moving around in databases. So their power, if you want to say that they are energy, yes, you can say that. But more important in my mind is, what is the source of that energy? The source of that energy is consciousness, human consciousness, our agreements about what's important and what's valuable and what these symbols mean. And embedded in those agreements are the agreements about who gets to use what, who has what rights and powers over the physical world, who gets to tell other people what to do, who can coordinate the labor and creativity of other people, and who can't. I mean, because really that's what this, if you want to look at it as a tool, fundamentally it is power to coordinate labor and direct resources. So it's very powerful in that sense. And I would love to talk about financial freedom at some point, but just want to bookmark that. But I'll turn it back over to you right now.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that. We can come back around to financial freedom. I want to talk about consciousness a little bit more generally as, let's say, sort of universal consciousness, as sort of perhaps not a manifester of destiny, but as sort of everything that is all at the same time. And I'm saying that through the lens of, I participate in the Siddhamaha yogic tradition. And so I'm a believer in universal consciousness and that, it's really all the same thing. And as someone who writes about money and climate specifically, can you talk about where we're at in history? And I'm saying that through the lens of, you have much more of a diverse experience and have clearly spent an immense amount of time thinking and writing about this. And I'm someone who just over the past year and a half have stumbled upon, Jem Bendell and deep adaptation. And is it already too late? And are we entering this period of sort of collective mourning? Can we turn this around? Clearly, the mainstream society is waking up to climate, but really not taking much action, it seems, at many levels. Where are we at in humanity from your viewpoint as someone who thinks about this?
Okay, yeah. So money as we know it, it does embody a certain kind of consciousness that is core to modernity and to some extent to civilization itself. But it's the consciousness of quantity. It is the ordering of the world that measures something against a universal standard. Therefore, it's deeply akin to science, which also seeks to order the world through a process of measurement. If you can't quantify it, you cannot study it scientifically. If you cannot assign a monetary value to it, it's not part of a market economy. So these underlying consciousness that underlies both science and money, which are two of the pillars of our society, is a consciousness of reductionism to numbers. Like, what is the value of something? How much is it worth? The answer is a number. If we want to scientifically characterize something, we have to be able to describe it numerically somehow. It could be levels, of various neurotransmitters and the relationships between them and the receptors and so forth. So this consciousness is capable of seeing things that cannot otherwise be seen, but it is also blind to something that the unconditioned mind can easily discern. So as far as climate goes, here again, we see the same pattern where there's obviously a grievous ecological crisis right now. For example, here in North America, in the eastern US, oak trees are dying all over the place. Like one species after another of tree is dying. The lightning bugs seem to be disappearing. The monarchs seem to be disappearing. There's not as many frogs as there used to be. Various songbirds are becoming rare. There's just, creeks are drying up. On my brother's farm, we were walking one day and we crossed over a creek that was basically like a series of puddles. And, it gets like that in August most years. But he said he was walking with an old timer who said that like in his youth, so this would have been like maybe the 1930s, 1940s, the creek was so high all year round that you couldn't cross it without boots all year round. Okay, so we have this all-encompassing ecological crisis that you really have to be in denial to deny it. But that consciousness of quantitative reductionism says, well, it must be, let's find the one thing that we can measure and blame all of these things on. What's the one number that is the essence of all of our problems? Oh, carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere.
Right.
So you can see how that is akin to the mentality of money that says, what's the one thing that could solve all of my problems?
Right.
If only I had enough money, I could do everything I want to do.
Right.
So I wrote a book on climate that is in part a critique of what I call carbon reductionism. And basically I describe how the ecological crisis is a function of ecocide, the destruction of pristine ecosystems, the destruction of the soil, the rainforests, the fish, the whales, the elephants, the apex predators, this progressive degradation of the organs of the living being that we call Earth. And that as long as we continue to do that, it won't matter if we reduce carbon emissions to zero. And in fact, that mentality of reductionism and isolating this variable is anti-ecological, and it plays out as further harm, as we're seeing now with the mining that's required to transition to a electric vehicle system. Like, it's actually the cure is worse than the disease. This is like a whole mindset. It's almost even, you could say, a whole mythology that worships the god of numbers. And my work in, like, I call it economics, but economics has to be about more than money if we're going to escape this mindset, if we're going to transcend this mindset. Just as environmentalism has to be more than about carbon, and the pursuit of knowledge has to be more than what fits right now into science.
I mean, I think it's really limitations of indexing anything. So, I grew up obviously in the West, in the Western philosophical tradition. The further I get into my own studies, the more I realize that Western philosophy is in many ways like a bastardization of, Vedic traditions, and Vedic philosophy that, to be honest, I don't quite know whether matter created consciousness, but I tend to now lean towards consciousness creating matter. And to the extent that we as humans ever try, whether it's money or, let's say, I read an article the other day that was like, the computers can't even contain the climate models anymore, right? It's like another article that like physics can't even contain the amount of data that we're creating. And it seems to be this like now global problem, but very Western driven, that we're just getting further and further abstracted in sort of a hyper individualistic, hyper competitive, just our brains can't even contain it or handle it. When, you look at indigenous cultures or even just like Vedic scriptures from, 800 to 1,000 years ago, a lot of the big perennial sort of human questions that we have are constantly being reborn, but have already kind of been addressed. Like, we know innately, I believe, as a species, what we need to do. And to me, it's like, it's not even a process of mourning. It's a surrender to understanding that consciousness and nature knows what it needs. It is omnipresent, and, it's like it's already there. And so nature will be fine. We might not be here and we will suffer, but nature, itself, this is of our own making in a lot of ways.
I used to think that, but now I think the opposite, actually, in a way. And I'm being a little playful here, but in my climate book, I discuss a scenario that I call the concrete world, in which humans survive, but nature dies. And we live in what to me is a dystopia, but what to some is a utopia, where all of our food is derived from, lab-grown meat and hydroponics factories and precision fermentation factories, where the whole planet has been paved over and it's all concrete, chrome, and steel, where we turn the planet into an engineering project. We modulate the atmospheric components through big carbon-sucking machines, and we bleach the sky white to reflect sunlight, and we turn the whole thing into this engineering project, this gigantic strip mine and waste dump where nature continues to die. And we retreat into these bubbles, personal bubbles, bubble cities, smart cities, and virtual realities, where we experience a simulation of all of the nature that we have destroyed. And I'm like, let's entertain the possibility that we can do this. Like, what if the limitation is not, nature will rebel and we will have to change our ways? What if actually we have a choice here? What if the essence of consciousness is choice? And what if our choice isn't, are we going to survive or not? What if the choice is, what world are we going to live in? A beautiful world or a high-tech metaverse transhumanist world? Because if our horror at the damage were going to save us and make us change, we would have already changed. This speaks to the question, is it too late? It's already too late to save so much of the beauty that has already been lost. Entire ecosystems, entire cultures, entire species are gone. But it's also never too late to take a new path. And when we take that new path, we will be astonished by how life returns, how quickly it returns, and how abundantly it returns, how profusely it returns. So the naturalist J.B. McKinnon speaks of a 10% world that we live in right now, just like the amount of nature left, the number of whales compared to 500 years ago, the fish biomass, the mangroves, the seagrass meadows, like all of these, even like in my lifetime, the amount of insects has plummeted. I remember as a kid driving on the highway, like the bug splatter. I mean, you'd have to turn the windshield wipers on. And now, we just go on, several 100-mile drives, occasionally, and like there's not a single bug in the window. Like, what's going on here? So like this is the 10% world. Why do we think that we're not going to be able to continue on this death path? I think that each loss poses us the question, do we want to live in a different way? And living in a different way means that we're not basing our choices just on whether we survive or not, but we base it on our desire to serve life. We base the choice on, does this serve life? Does this serve beauty? It's a very different understanding of our purpose here. And it helps to know that nature is itself a being that is full of beings that we can relate to, rather than we're alone in a universe of force and mass, of dead matter that gives the appearance of life through its combinations, but we are the only source of intelligence here. It's a different relationship.
Yeah, I love that. I'm kind of on a boomerang here. We'll come back to money here in a second. I want to talk about the role of intuition in your own life. Now, as someone, I am financially independent. I choose what I work on based on what I love. But so much of my life, once I got to financial independence and I started writing about money and my relationship to it and started getting reader feedback and connecting with others, my life and my purpose expanded beyond anything I could have ever expected. And I'm saying that through the lens of serving others and helping others be less stressed about money and realize that so much of what they seek, they already have, in terms of, if they have a partner they love and kids they love and a job they kind of love, it's like, they've already won the game. That's kind of the funny thing about my work is I help people make and save and invest more money and then recognize that really, money's just what they were chasing, they already have. And I'm saying this, really out of personal curiosity. You've written many books. Your work is truly transcendent and incredible. You're 17, 20 to 20 years older than me. What drives your life? Is it intuition led? How do you pick projects you care about? Are you in service of a greater mission? What is your relationship to work? And I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, I am in service to a greater mission, not in perfect service. And I can't necessarily say what the mission is. I mean, I could describe it, but any description I offer is going to be like a reduced version of what it is, like even reduced in my mind to familiar concepts. I can often recognize when something is in service to that mission or not by a feeling of aliveness and excitement that I get, where a key indicator is that I, instead of procrastinating, like I use that as procrastination. Like I'm drawn to do it more than I'm drawn to anything else. Like I'd rather work on this than eat lunch. I'd rather work on this than, go check my email. Or that's a sure sign that I'm doing something that's aligned with this mission. And obviously the mission, I mean, I don't know, like maybe some people, their mission is to maximize their wealth and power, but that's not my mission. And I think most people are here to leave the world more alive and more beautiful than they found it. And that could be expressed through family, could be expressed through an enterprise out in the world, could be expressed through music and through art, through gardening, through working with nature. There's many ways that could be expressed, but that's the commonality, is that we're not just here for ourselves, which should be obvious because we're all going to die someday. And anything that is just for yourself isn't going to last. Like, how could that be your mission if it is nullified by your death? I guess what I'm saying is I have the same mission as everybody else. And
do you have a spiritual practice?
Well, I'm curious what you mean by a spiritual practice.
Spiritual defined as a series of a sort of pursuit or a surrendering to something so much larger than yourself in order to become a full expression of what it means to be human in this moment. So you mentioned doing work that makes you feel alive, and when something feels right or it doesn't feel right.
One of the themes that I've written about, and it's in Sacred Economics, pretty strong actually, is the toxic division of the world into two parts, the material and the spiritual, the sacred and the profane, where our healing as a civilization comes from recognizing the sacredness of the things that we have held profane, such as commodities, such as, quote, natural resources, like to make them into something whose value and very existence is defined by its usefulness to ourselves. That's to desacralize it. So when we no longer locate sacredness in an extra material realm, then what does spiritual practice mean? And then I would also look at the word practice. I wrote an essay, I think it was earlier this year, maybe last year, called "The Rehearsal is Over." And part of it is like, yeah, I'm done practicing. I want to actually do it for real, which isn't to say like, yeah, like, I will take time to disengage from the world, to enter my own inner world through meditation, through plant medicine. I will, I mean, for me, just walking and entering into a deep trance, that might be one of my key practices. And see, here I am calling it a practice, but the question is, practice for what? How long are we going to keep practicing?
Right. But you're in your work, I read it, and it's like, it's not just intellectual gymnastics. And I say that through the lens of, I studied, philosophy, University of Chicago. I have friends who are some of the top philosophy professors in the U.S., at Princeton, at Oxford, and these people who, to me, it's just intellectual sort of backflipping, a lot of their work. It just misses the point. Whether it's just the pure limit of language and comprehension. I mean, that's what we're doing here. We're just spending 45 minutes together riding a wave of consciousness with words that will always fall short, right? We're trying to get closer and closer to some idea. But in your work, I just have to say, it's so rare for me. I get this in, I don't get it from like Alan Watts. That to me is just verbal gymnastics. Beautiful, clearly woke up a lot of people. But, when I think of like, Thich Nhat Hanh, or Pema Chodron, or, I read your work through that lens. I mean, it breathes. Your work really breathes with a presence that it flattened me, man. And I'm saying that through, having written a book and put all of my love and energy into something that is, now my book's in 13 languages and people in Japan reach out, taking something away that was so far beyond anything, that I could have put into it. It's alive. I'm thinking about, and your work, man, it's extremely energy rich. And I'm just, I guess I'm curious. I'm really curious where that comes from. Is that intentional?
My words are a vehicle for my voice. Even my written words, I'm always like kind of saying them out loud in my head as I write. And my voice resonates with what I have seen and what I know about where we have come from and where we're going, which is why, so another one of my books is called The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. And it's not that I made an especially compelling logical argument proving that the world could be better than it is right now. It's that I'm speaking from a reality that I am intimately familiar with. And that's what gets transmitted through the voice. But I'm also right now very moved that you see that and recognize that.
It's just magic, man. Yeah. It's magic.
So you asked, do I have a spiritual practice? As if maybe that would explain this energy and this power in my words. But here's the thing. I mean, I don't have any particularly impressive spiritual practice or heroic background. Mm-hmm. The way it is, have you ever been to a satsang or something like that? And at the beginning, they say, we dedicate the fruits of this practice to all sentient beings. Mm-hmm. Well, okay, I'm one of those sentient beings. And in a way, it's like everybody else's practice. All of these committed yogis and meditators have the benefits of that have been made available to me. Your practice that has brought me and other people like me into this world as kind of receiving antennas for information that you're prepared for, which means that I'm not, necessarily, in fact, I am not at a higher level of spiritual development than anybody else.
Yeah, for sure.
I just have access to this information. It's just like a place I come from that I know that certain things are true. And I'm not pulling any kind of spiritual authority and saying, I know that they are true, therefore you should believe me. That's not an argument,
For sure.
Right. It's more that just an offering to feel and know by resonance what I feel and know.
Yeah, I love that. The thing that's most surprising to me about this conversation is you're not holding on tightly to any of this. I kind of expected you to get on, and I've seen some of your interviews and defend the work and this, and there's a lightness to your presence, which I really love. You're just kind of there's this beautiful, Jack Kerouac quote, which he said, he's like, enlightenment is when you no longer care. It's sort of, there's just a lightness to it. And I feel that from you. And I'm saying that for our audience because, a lot of people that listen to this show, they're stuck between an irrational level of fear and an illusion of control. They're worried about taking some risk in their life, which really isn't much of a risk, but they've been conditioned to think that it's risky. Yeah. And they, for some reason, think they have a level of control in their life whether it's from their full-time job where they're making massive sacrifices, for a paycheck.
Okay, yeah. So here's the thing that is coming to me right now. Don't beat yourself up for your choices. If I have a practice, it's non-judgment. Judgment meaning, if I were you, I wouldn't have done that. That's usually based on ignorance of what actually it is like to be you. Self-judgment is also kind of the same stance. I should have done differently than I did. So the struggles of the people you're describing, this feeling of being torn by the need for security on one hand and passion on the other hand for something, like, that's real. Don't trivialize that. And don't think that there's a quick solution to that if only you were more enlightened, you would discover. This is the condition that you are in. And yes, there is something on the other side of it, but not by denying it, not by diminishing it in your mind. What Jack Kerouac is saying in that quote isn't like, it's not to like, oh, be numb to everything and don't care too much. Really, what he's speaking from is knowing that he's going to die. And therefore, when you really take that in, then a lot of the things that seem important are not actually that important, and other things become important. And so to trust the operation of lost truths as they come into us is one of the most powerful and necessary practices that there is. Like, just bring in the lost truths, the ones that were too scary to contemplate, or too depressing to contemplate, or even too radiant and beautiful to contemplate, that, through their radiance and hope make you uncomfortable because they illuminate all the more the shadows of the world that you're in. Bring those in too. And then, but without thinking, like, one thing that prevents us from bringing in uncomfortable truths is the idea that, well, if I acknowledge this, then I have to do something about it. Nope, you don't have to do anything about it. The very act of bringing it into full contemplation sets a process in motion that will result in you doing something about it.
Yeah, I often say, if you feel stuck, it's because you are, and that's really just sort of that moment of recognition. And that's the trusting, because I think a lot of people we're driven by our rationality, and our mind tends to get us stuck when our intuition, when it's cultivated and trusted, it's not only powerful, but it's a guiding, it's a guiding light. It's an empowering energy, in us, and that's taken me quite a long time to learn. One of the big mistakes I made in my own life was believing that money was freedom. And I grew up with parents who had very little, and money was always something they fought about. It was stress. It was very present in my life. From a young age, I'm an only child. They moved from southern Indiana, one stoplight town, to the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and inserted me directly in the meritocracy, and created a deep sense of lack in my life, and a desire that really drove me to sacrifice my entire 20s in the pursuit of money. Thankfully, I'd read Your Money or Your Life by Vicki Robbins, so I was saving 80+% of my income and acquiring more and more freedom along the way, but really woke up at the age of 30 with a successful business, financially independent, but extremely lost. And it took a period of a couple of years, I would say, of decompression and opening and mourning to recognize that it wasn't about the money. What I really, was seeking was peace in my life, and connection and love, and, all of those things that make us human. And I almost feel like, I made this massive, massive sacrifice and trading of my entire 20s, for money. And that was the huge shift in my own life, where I recognized that, freedom to me wasn't about being able to do whatever I wanted to do whenever I wanted to do it. It was really just about, not being stressed, feeling peace and feeling connected, and being able to do the work, being able to wake up and just, write a book or sit on my hammock. And it really wasn't about unlimited choices. It was about being able to have the time to do a few things, so his freedom really only existed within limits. And one of the reasons I called my book Financial Freedom is because I always associated financial freedom with these scammy sort of 90s infomercials. And what I wanted to do is take a phrase that was completely hollow and devoid of meaning, and so drug through the mud, and try to re-inject truth into it and use it as a way so people would pay attention. And from a marketing standpoint, that certainly worked, but also leads to sort of the larger discussion of, what is freedom really? And you mentioned, and I know you mentioned, financial freedom in sacred economics. You mentioned you wanted to get back to this topic. Let's start with what does financial freedom mean?
Well,
to
it's
you?
interesting just listening to you. It strikes me that you can interpret that phrase in two ways. One is the freedom that comes from financial abundance, but there's also the idea of freedom from the financial.
Exactly.
And you're talking about a transition from the first to the second in your own life. And I want to thank you for walking that path. You can see it as a mistake, but it was the condition that you were born into, that you had to make that journey. And you also made it by proxy for many other people, because this is a general condition of our civilization. So, and by sharing it, maybe you save other people that particular detour, because you can, like the things you say are important, that what you really wanted in your search for financial freedom was, you said, to be connected. Maybe you could also say to actually feel like you belong somewhere. This is another phrase, is financial security, which is even more this feeling of being at home, of being okay here, of belonging here, which ordinarily comes through connections. I mean, ordinarily, before the money age, came through connections to place, to community, to the plants and animals around you. That's what makes you secure, to know your place, to know your environment, to know the people. And when those relationships are cut off, what's left? Well, we depend on money for security. And you can get some kind of security that way, but you're only as secure or only as free as the security of the money, which, during the time that, say, Vicki Robin was writing, I mean, that was like, she was writing halfway through a period of 2 or 3 generations of financial stability. And so this idea of save 80% of your income, and all that kind of stuff, it really made sense in that era. But we are entering a different era right now, where the money and the freedom that money can give us is a lot less secure. It's a lot less reliable. It could, hyperinflation could set in, confiscation, financial collapse, like all kinds of things could happen where these financial assets revert to what they actually are on the physical level, which is a bunch of symbols. And so as that possibility looms larger, an uneasiness grows within people who are dependent only on money for their security and their freedom. And we seek to establish other kinds of wealth, the wealth of relationship. And these other kinds of wealth, they flow both ways, because they are also avenues for generosity and avenues for creativity and for co-creation. So they bring us more fully into the world. This conventional idea of financial freedom is actually a kind of a withdrawal from the world. You don't need to depend on any one person or any one thing or any one place, because money is alienable from all of those. It's extractable and abstractable. So it's akin to the conventional notion of spirituality, which is also a withdrawal from the world. You're in an abstract realm. And that is not really why we're here. We're not here to separate from the world that we have entered as souls for a reason. So the call to be more related and more at home, it's not just for our personal security. And as you put it very well, it's not so that we can make any choice free of constraint. Like, we came here for constraint. Incarnation means incarnating not just into a body, but into relationships, into a place, into a situation that needs our help, that needs our gifts, that calls our creativity. And if you don't do that, you're not going to feel fully alive. Feeling fully alive means to attach. It means to be material. It means to enter the matrix of giving and receiving that defines all of life, and not to be an exception to life that doesn't need it. I'm independent. I don't need your gifts. I don't need to be in your debt. And if I have extra, maybe I'll give to you, but I don't want to owe anybody anything. Like, that's separation. That's not why we're here. We have to accept our dependency. And it is only through that dependency, actually, that we really can fulfill our creative mission here.
And you give away a lot of your work. I know your courses are free or donation based. You'll speak for free. Is money something that doesn't stress you out, or has it ever stressed you out? And I'm saying that through the lens of, I look at your career and now I can do that. I can participate and write the things I'm curious about and create, but I had to do an immense amount of emotional, psychological, spiritual, financial work to even get to a place where I believed that was even possible. What about, I'd love to end on this. In your own life, why do you speak for free? Why do you give your content away for donations? Does money stress you out? Let's come back full circle to your relationship to money.
Yeah, I usually don't describe it as free. I say it's by gift, and I let the reader, user, the participant at an event determine what the return gift will be based on their gratitude. And, some people give nothing. I mean, on Substack, probably 98% of the subscribers don't pay. Online courses, though, like a good 50% of people pay something. So it's not really free, which sets up an expectation of no return. In-person events, I have people pay for hard costs, like the room and board of the facility, but the program then is by donation. And, sometimes I actually will receive more that way than I would if I charged, depending on how much I charged. So it is viable. I'm not living in poverty. Although I began that way when I first published The Ascent of Humanity, which is my first major book. Nobody bought it really. I was living month to month, or even not paying bills because I didn't have the money. Like there were even times where I was looking for change underneath the seat of my car to get gas. I was, for a couple of years, I was in pretty deep poverty. It just,
but the work just drove you? The purity of the mission?
It just didn't.
How did you...
I had the whole Ascent of Humanity online, as I was working on it, I was put it up online. And when I published the book, I'm like, okay, I guess I should take it off now. Otherwise, people won't buy the book. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. I was like, well, what about the people who can't afford the book? And I don't know. I didn't even have rationalization so much. It just didn't feel good. So I listened to that. And it just doesn't feel good. I mean, there are people out there who, I get these letters all the time. Like, thank you for making your course available for free or by gift, because I literally don't have $10 a month to pay for groceries. That's how tight my budget is. There are hundreds of millions of people on this earth, or billions, who are in that, and I don't want to deny them this. I would rather have some people who could pay not pay if it makes it available to people who I remember what it was like when I was in 2008, 2009, when I was broke, and some speaker comes to town, on some really interesting topic, $20. I couldn't go. I couldn't go. I only had $40 in my wallet. So there's that. But it's also partly a trust in human nature, in an aspect of human nature called generosity, that people want to give. They want to. And if I see that in them, I can invoke that and bootstrap a business model of patronage, essentially. How do I know that's human nature? Because I feel it too. Like when Radiohead put In Rainbows up for free, I wanted to pay for it. It's not because I think Radiohead needs the money.
Yep.
I want to because it feels really good. I want to pay for it. I use this browser extension called Night Eye, and it makes all the websites white text on dark backgrounds, so it doesn't hurt my eyes as much. And so I was subscribing to it, and I'm like, oh, I want the lifetime version, So I wrote them, and they're like, oh, well, we have a discount for current subscribers to get the lifetime version. And I said, I don't want a discount. I want to pay full price for such an excellent browser extension. And they were just like, what? They were like, that really touches our hearts, Because I'm sure you've experienced this too, if you experience something beautiful, you want to give in return. That's called gratitude. Gratitude is the feeling of having received richly and the desire to return the gift. That's the reality I want to live in. This isn't about me being self-sacrificing. This is about entering a different reality. And I am happy to receive lots of money if that's the way it works out. And I know of myself that I will put it to a beautiful use. That to accumulate
I love that.
Too much is a waste of money. It could disappear with hyperinflation. It could get confiscated. I could die prematurely. Any number of things could happen to it. But as my beautiful former wife, Patsy, says, money is not yours until you've spent it.
Well, thank you, Charles, for spending this time with me in this moment. It's truly an honor, and I'm very grateful for this conversation and to have this time. And thank you for sharing your wisdom. And I can't even begin to imagine what people will take away from this conversation. And we will let it ripple into the universe for all time. So thank you, Charles. This is Charles Eisenstein. the author of Sacred Economics, The Yoga of Eating, The Coronation. Check out charleseisenstein.com. He has an immense number of courses and videos and some podcasts, and please dive deeper into his work. It is a well of incredible content. Thank you, Charles. I hope you have a wonderful day.